Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you to the community and the organizers. I thought it was refreshing to hear from Guy tonight. A lot of what he's done, talking about getting to the ATO very rapidly. I'll actually touch on some of those points. Thank you for Susie as well. Seeing Pivotal, where we're at, are interested in seeing how that progresses. So a lot of I'm proud to be here to be talking about some of what we're doing in the space along with our partners with Microsoft and but lots of great technology topics here. Who's seen The Matrix? It's been a while, right? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. So there was a red pill and a blue pill, and there was this choice. And when I was thinking of this talk and thinking about multi-cloud, which you heard Guy talk about, using a combination of on-premise, moving to Azure, potentially using other cloud providers, there's this question of, do we do hybrid? Do we do multi? Do we do both, right? What does that look like? And what does that have to do with the overall theme of the meetup, which was advancing digital in the government? So quick intro about myself. I started off way back in college. I worked at NIH as an intern. And I did some fun fruit fly genome sequencing using Java Swing applications. Anyone work at NIH or PubMed, any of this? So that was a fun experience. I actually learned at the time NIH had, they didn't call it a cloud, it was just a cluster, but they had this massive 50 or 100,000 node set of Linux machines that you could actually slice off like a core or two here and there. So that was cloud, right, 15 plus years ago. And then after that, I went on to work at Booz Allen. I worked on this project, and I wondered what happened to it. It's called AlexNet for the FDA. They happened to be undergoing maintenance while I was making these slides. So I don't think they've changed the technology too much in the last couple of years, but I think maybe they're ready for a change. And then I spent some time at Oracle. I worked with a lot of federal civilian agencies, Homeland Security, others, a number of them working on digital transformation at the time. It wasn't really digital then, it was just IT transformation or transformation of their business. But I don't know, who likes Oracle? Probably raise your hand, you willing to do that? And so now I'm at Pivotal, and who's heard of Pivotal? Got some hands? Okay, great. So we got some folks here. This is just a screenshot of our main page, but what I wanted to point out is we have this notion of imagining having an idea in the morning and shipping that before the day is over. We have a number of customers, mostly in the commercial space, that have been talking about being able to do this. Insurance companies like Allstate that are 100 years old, and they're focused on becoming more of a software-defined business, right? And so you hear about digital, and we're helping them to do that. So I'm happy at Pivotal. I'm good. And what I do there, I work particularly with our cloud provider partners, specifically Microsoft. I've been personally leading a lot of that technical relationship work for the last 2 years. We're building out our team to do even more exciting things with Microsoft, including Azure Gov, Azure Stack, and then we also work with all of our SI partners as well. So again, thinking about what does digital mean, of course I looked this up on Google. 188 million results, that's a lot. And it's talking about digits of zeros and ones. So to me, this says software, right? Software is important. But of course the first hit is a McKinsey & Company article, right? They want to sell you something. So what does digital really mean? And thinking about what digital means in the government today, going to Digital Gov, we see things like 18F, right? There's been a great movement in the government space and talking about digital and how do we enhance customer services, citizen services, how do we help support the internal groups within our agencies and the mission work that they do. So we things like code, seeing the word code on a main page, right? Differentiating software. Mobile, how do we have a mobile-first strategy where a lot of our government agencies are providing a mobile presence or they're supporting their workers with mobile solutions. And then social media and user experience. These are all top-of-mind terms that you hear. And so what does digital mean to Pivotal? Pivotal is a company, we provide software, cloud-based software, which I'll talk about. We also help these organizations kind of work through what does agile software development look like. And so I asked one of our senior directors of product, he also happens to be a Microsoft MVP, and I kind of put him on the spot and said, hey, I'm giving this talk, what do you think digital means. And it's a focus on delivering customers a software-powered experience that improves service. And I thought that was a pretty good, succinct answer, and that in the public sector, the term service means a lot of things. But what does digital have to do with clouds? Coming back to the topic, right? The red pill or the blue pill. Organizations want this ability to move faster. They don't want to be locked out of their preferred services. You heard Guy talk about a number of the services that they're using from Microsoft moving to the cloud, right? You want to have that choice. And so how are organizations doing that? Part of this is using the right cloud for that application. Someone asked about why Azure over AWS. And there's differences between these clouds, right? There might be options that you want to use across these. And ultimately, a lot of this has to do with competition and kind of keeping each other honest. But at the end of the day, each one will have its capabilities. And as a consumer of those, you want to leverage these first-party cloud services to build your differentiating, customer service-based applications. You also want to make it easy to discover these, right? Services like blockchain, as they become easier to use and more consumable, how do we enable developers to be able to go out and build these across clouds, right? If you have a multi-cloud strategy, if you're doing on-premise, public cloud, or 2 public clouds or more, how do we make this easier to do? And ultimately, how do you maybe avoid some of the unexpected costs associated with operating multiple clouds? So if you go all in on one and you've spent a lot of time training your resources on that cloud, how do you transition those when you decide to make a change? Or if you're just going from, you have vSphere, VMware admins that have been around for 10 plus years now, how do they transition to something like working with Azure? So what are my choices? What are your choices? So many choices. I have a 9-month-old, and so when I say so big, he puts his arms up. So I was thinking that when I created this, the title here. So Singleton, what if you move some of your workloads to just a single region, right? Azure Gov has 6 regions. You move an app to one region. It has some high availability within that region, but you're not really looking at a more broad footprint. That's probably fine, and there's probably a lot of departmental applications out there that's sufficient for, right? You can save costs doing that. Active-active. We hear this a lot, and this has always been a challenge. It's becoming easier. The hard part is still the data, right? Getting bidirectional replication of data across different sites, still a challenge. Some of the solutions out there are fairly expensive. But at least from an application standpoint, if we're building modern cloud-native applications, we can do this more easily, where you can abstract away a lot of the business logic and really focus on the hard part in a more decoupled manner. Active passes, your DR scenarios. So these are outlining these different situations of how we would approach going from maybe an on-premise cloud today into moving to a public cloud. And so when we talk about hybrid, right, we think of on-premise versus public, and then multi-cloud might assume multiple public clouds. It's really the combination of all of these. So this is obviously a very pivotal-centric slide, but you can take this as running applications across multiple sites. Say you're developing microservices, and ultimately you have this data replication problem that you might want to tackle. We certainly have solutions. We're not the only one out there. But the idea is that you can do this today. And so if you can do that, what's the right answer? It depends, right? It always depends. What are you trying to achieve? I think Guy's point around a lot of the applications at the SBA that they could move, and they're trying to shift maybe 95% of those to cloud. That's great for them. It may not be a fit for every organization. We're going to see that. That's why Microsoft, for example, is providing a solution, an on-premise solution with Azure Stack, and having that parity between on-premise cloud infrastructure and your public cloud Azure footprint as well. So you have clouds. What's the point of having a multi-cloud strategy? It's to build more software. It's to provide those services, that digital experience to our customers that we mentioned earlier on, right? So that's what a lot of Pivotal is focused on, is helping our customers build that software faster, working with our partners to enable our joint customers to build that software faster. but it's not that easy. It's never that easy, is it? There's government contracts, there's time frames and milestones and all regulatory changes that come down the pipe. It's never that easy. I think Guy showed that it can be easier if you take the right approach. And I'd say Pivotal, we would agree on that. So one example here, there was actually an article in the Washington Post about this recently that talked about the DIUX, which is the Pentagon's Silicon Valley office. They worked with Pivotal to build an application. So a few months ago. And our folks paired up, our developers paired up with these airmen in the Air Force. And this application was for supporting forces over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the process, you can see from the top, was this whiteboard exercise that they used that would take 8 hours a day, millions of dollars, over the course of a few days, and they had to do this repeatedly, day in, day out. And it was very challenging and very costly. When we paired up with them to come up with a scope of an application to help support this, we built this with them in a matter of weeks together. Out of those 6 airmen, we were able to pull a number of them back so that they're no longer having to use as many people for this process. They can free them up to do other things. And you can see this application down at the bottom that we've built that. And we did it in a number of weeks. We put it on a platform that was already ATO'd so that they only had to do the incremental, address the incremental controls as a part of that application. And ultimately what that did was provide from an end user or business standpoint, which is an ROI within a week. So they made their money back in 7 days, and then they're saving about $1 million a day now based on this application that's now supporting the mission. So how do they do that? This is not our term. This is our customer's term that we work with, is this ATO in a day. I don't think they're quite there yet, as it shows. They're down, depending on the application, 7 to 30 days, but previously it was over 6 months. And so the goal is, in having clouds, multiple clouds in this case, and having a platform on top of those cloud options to abstract and inherit the controls, when you actually build a custom application like that tanker planning app that DIUX built, you can then shorten that cycle to get the ATO for that application in just a matter of days. They're specifically leveraging a microservice-based architecture, using APIs for their data calls as opposed to very tightly coupled data interaction. One of the things that Pivotal does is always advocate CI/CD pipelines. So whatever your tool of choice is for getting code from when you write it into production, set that up first, right? Do your automated testing, build all these out so it's easier to move that code through a pipeline and get it into production. So what is this platform? Has anyone heard of Cloud Foundry? Folks heard of Pivotal? Okay, so we know some folks at Cloud Foundry. So Cloud Foundry is open source. This is an example from Cloud Foundry Summit, which is the open source conference that supports this. Cloud.gov is based on that open source Cloud Foundry. Pivotal's not particularly involved, but what they've shown here is that, again, you can inherit a lot of the security controls associated with getting that ATO, and they've gotten that down to a very short number. And in this case, if you're using that platform, it's only 15 controls that you have to address with your application. So Pivotal, with our particular customers, we have 2 platforms ATO'd outside of cloud.gov that we've created security packages and helped towards that accreditation. And so being able to take those and repeat that for other customers that want to use that solution is important. So coming back to our software development lifecycle, right? There's still these pain points associated with legacy applications, moving those over. Part of what we want to do is kind of push forward with some of these more modern approaches, right? DevOps, continuous delivery, microservices, and again, with that goal of being able to deploy faster. Now, if you want to do that across multiple clouds, in theory, it helps to have a layer of abstraction. So bringing the practices, right, the people and process and the technology together, Pivotal will use the term cloud native a lot to distinguish maybe from legacy applications, but moving forward, how do you sign up? Where does this come together? we specifically have a marketplace offering on Azure. This is for commercial. We're working on the Azure Gov marketplace offering. So if you have an Azure Gov subscription, you'll be able to go in, provision our platform, and try it out. The idea here is that if you were to run this on Azure Commercial or Azure Stack or Azure Gov, or even a vSphere environment or OpenStack if you're on premise today, that as a developer you can push your you can run your application on this in the same way no matter which cloud you're on. You can access a separate marketplace, not Azure Marketplace, of services that you can provision on demand. So if you want blockchain on demand or Azure SQL DB, you can go and provision that. This is kind of a deeper look at our architecture. We do support a mix of application languages. So Java, Pivotal happens to be the steward of the Spring framework, if you're familiar with that. So some great integration points there. We support .NET, Ruby, Go, Python, anything you want from a language perspective. We're working very closely with the Microsoft .NET team in building out microservice-based framework libraries that developers can use there. So the platform provides this layer of abstraction on top of these different clouds. And when we're running on something like Azure or Azure Gov, we want to inherit some of the capabilities that those provide. So instead of creating additional VMs to support a database or blob storage, we can actually offload those and delegate to the highly available and resilient services that Azure provides in those areas. And from a developer standpoint, having access to those, again, through a marketplace where you can just type a command line or go to a UI and click a button, you can get the data service on demand that you need, and it's nice and loosely coupled from your application logic. Here's just a quick view at, if you were looking at a more modern architecture and you were to plug this in between Pivotal Cloud Foundry and some of the Azure components, you can tie in with Azure's API management, SQL DB, maybe you write some Spring-based applications or .NET. We can tie into single sign-on from an Active Directory or Azure AD standpoint. So the idea here is that we've built in a lot of the joint engineering at this abstraction layer so that as developers and consumers of the platform, you don't have to worry about that. So with that, I'll leave you with what pill will you choose? Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? You have a question here?
Is your slides available somewhere?
Sure. We can figure that out.
There's one more question up here. Just a second.
So you talked about hybrid cloud versus in the cloud, like on-premise or something. Can I take it that you can actually ultimately become cloud agnostic, provider agnostic? It doesn't really matter for me as a developer or as a product, as somebody who's going to buy something, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, whether it's Google Cloud, any damn thing. I use some product, provision something that I want, and let's say the people who are going to buy the services actually bother about the cost and all those other things in the background.
Yeah, so Pivotal Cloud Foundry as this application runtime does provide that agnosticity, right? So it runs, you can run these on all the different clouds. It runs the exact same. The command lines are all the same. You can actually even provision services from AWS into your PCF on Azure. So there's this notion of a broker that can facilitate that. There's an open broker API that a lot of companies, including Red Hat and IBM, are helping build out in conjunction with Pivotal. So we're kind of raising that layer of abstraction. But the point is you still have that choice of being able to go to, say, a first-party data service when you want to, right? If you want to use Cosmos DB on Azure and have that amazing speed that it provides, you can still do that. But your applications are decoupled from that, right? You want to minimize that kind of surface area that interfaces with those. So if you decide to change to a different database tomorrow, you can do so. And that's up to your application developer. Thank you.